You know, I gotta say, when I first saw that footage, I was like, is that CGI a rocket? Taller than the Statue of Liberty, not just launching, but being caught out of the air. Yeah. It's like, come on, straight out of a sci-fi movie, right?
Yeah, the visuals were something else, weren't they? But this was the real deal. No special effects. And it's a pretty big deal for SpaceX for their whole Starship program.
Okay, so SpaceX, they launch rockets all the time, right? That's what they do. What's so important about this particular test? I mean, is this really what gets us to Mars, to the moon, all that?
Well, this wasn't just any launch. This was all about reusability. This was actually the 5th test flight of their Starship. Their fully reusable, super heavy lift vehicle, the one that's supposed to, take us past Earth's orbit. So Sunday, Starship launches from Texas. Pretty normal so far. But get this, the super heavy booster, that's that giant first stage of the rocket, it doesn't do the usual splashdown in the ocean.
Wait, so where'd it go?
It comes back, it uses its engines, does this controlled descent, a guided return, back to the launch site. And here's the really wild part. It's caught right out of the air by these, well, they're like massive arms on the launch tower. They call it Mechazilla.
Mechazilla. Seriously, you can't make this stuff up. But, okay, there's got to be a reason why everybody's going crazy for this whole booster catch. It's more than just a cool visual, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is all about reusability, which, it's kind of the holy grail when it comes to space travel, especially if you want to make it affordable. Think about it. You get on a plane. They don't just scrap the plane after one flight, right?
Yeah, that'd be a little pricey.
Exactly. So for space travel to be more, accessible, for it to actually be affordable, we need reusable rockets. I mean, SpaceX, they're talking about launches every few days, maybe even hours, instead of weeks or months. And this gets them a lot closer to that.
So, like, the difference between taking a bus and having to, like, buy a brand new car for every trip.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about space tourism. Think about the possibilities. Scientific research, launching satellites, even building stuff in space.
Yeah.
If we can get those launch costs way down, I mean, the sky's the limit.
It really makes you appreciate all the work that goes into just one launch.
Yeah.
But hold on, while everyone's watching the booster do this whole, catch me if you can thing, the Starship upper stage, the part that actually carries, the cargo or the crew, that wasn't just along for the ride, right?
No, not at all. While the booster was busy stealing the show, the upper stage was off on its own journey. It reached space, traveled halfway around the world, and that brings up a whole other challenge, reentry. We're talking temperatures around 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt aluminum.
Okay, now that's just terrifying. How do you even begin to design something that can survive that kind of heat?
It's a huge challenge, and it all comes down to the heat shield. It's made of these specialized ceramic tiles. They're designed to absorb and radiate heat, but even those have their limits. Keeping them intact during re-entry, that's one of the biggest challenges in designing spacecraft. But for this test, it seems like SpaceX, they pulled it off. The Starship splashed down in the Indian Ocean right on schedule. Although catching the upper stage, that's still a goal for the future.
So 2 successful parts of one test, but in very different ways.
Exactly. And that's why this test flight has everyone so excited.
2 parts, 1 test, and both successful. Feels like a real turning point. But knowing SpaceX, they're already thinking about what's next, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah. This was big, don't get me wrong, but it's part of a much bigger plan, right? Their goals are, well, long-term is putting it mildly. They're already talking about catching the whole Starship, not just the booster.
The whole shebang. Ambitious.
Yeah, and they're not just talking. They're building a second launch pad in Texas, more in Florida. I mean, it's like a Starship factory down there.
They are not messing around. But even with reusable rockets, getting to Mars, setting up bases, all that, that's still got to take a ton of fuel. I mean, that's got to be a challenge.
Right, and that's where another piece of their plan comes in. They call them orbital refueling depots.
Orbital refueling depots. Is that like space gas stations?
Pretty much. The idea is instead of one massive rocket that has to carry all the fuel it needs for, a round trip to Mars, you have smaller launches. You refuel in orbit. Makes everything way more efficient.
So instead of driving across the country on 1 tank of gas, you're stopping for, snacks and to fill up a tank.
Exactly. And then it's not just about quick trips to the moon. We're talking like regular missions to Mars, maybe even beyond. It's pretty wild when you think about it.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around. Refueling in space, catching these giant rockets. Makes you wonder, is Elon Musk just a character from some sci-fi novel he wrote? But seriously, is any of this really possible?
Well, we got to remember, this is still early, right? Catching the booster once, that's amazing. But doing it consistently, reliably, that's a whole other
And
thing.
catching the whole Starship.
Oh yeah, that's like next level. Imagine trying to dock a school bus onto a moving truck in a hurricane. That's kind of the level of precision we're talking about.
Okay, point taken. But even if they nail the catching part, building enough of these starships, I mean, to
Yeah.
make all of this possible, that's got to be a massive undertaking. Can they actually build them fast enough?
Yeah, that's another hurdle for sure. Building a factory is one thing, but can they actually churn these things out on schedule, affordably? Jury's still out on that one.
Lot riding on this technology.
Yeah.
It's not just SpaceX, though, right? I mean, NASA's been pretty interested in Starship, too.
Huge interest, yeah. NASA picked SpaceX to develop a version of Starship for their Artemis lunar landings. I mean, that's a big deal.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's how we're approaching space exploration.
Yeah.
Kind of new era, right? But about this test flight, there were those reports about some heat shield damage during reentry. We're talking about those insane temperatures.
Yeah.
How big of a setback is that?
Right, yeah, it wasn't all perfect, right? Some of the Starship's heat shield tiles, those flaps that help control it as it comes back through the atmosphere, they showed some wear and tear.
So did the heat shield fail? Is this a major problem?
Too early to say for sure. SpaceX says it was minor, but they'll have to analyze the data. It's all part of the process, you know. SpaceX, they work on this iterative model. They learn with each test, they improve. And this heat shield thing, even if it's not ideal, that gives them data.
Trial and error, but with rockets. High stakes.
That's one way to put it. Every launch, they get more data, refine the designs, make Starship even tougher. It's a process.
This latest test, even with a few bumps, it feels different. Feels like a major leap. But are we actually closer to seeing people on Mars because of this? What are the big things SpaceX still has to figure out?
Closer, yeah, definitely closer than last week. Each one of these tests, it's a step, you know? But got to be realistic. Still some big, big hurdles before we're buying those tickets to Mars.
So what are they? What are those big challenges, the ones between us and, building a life on Mars?
Well, first things first, they got to nail catching the whole Starship. Every time. Not just the booster. That's the whole point of this rapid reusability, right? And then there's the whole refueling thing.
Right, those space gas stations. It can't be easy.
Incredibly complex. We're talking multiple launches, some seriously delicate maneuvers up there, and then proving that they can transfer, well, massive amounts of cryogenic fuel and do it safely. That's the super cool stuff. Liquefied.
Cryogenic fuel. Okay, yeah, that sounds a tad risky.
Rocket science is never simple, but even with all the tech challenges, there's a bigger one, you know? The human factor.
Oh, right, sending people to Mars? That's not like sending a robot. Way more to think about.
Way more. You're talking about keeping people alive and healthy for months in deep space. Not to mention surviving on a planet that, well, let's face it, isn't exactly human-friendly.
It's like we're trying to build a city on another planet, a city that can take care of itself, and oh yeah, figure out how to get everyone there and back alive. Suddenly catching a rocket seems almost easy.
Right. But even with all that, you got to admit what SpaceX is doing, especially with this test, it's pretty amazing.
It's hard not to get excited, right? Feels like a turning point, like we're really at this crossroads for space exploration. It has me thinking, though, and this is for everyone listening, if SpaceX actually pulls this off, even half of it, the reusable rockets, the refueling, these regular Starship flights, does that change everything? Like how we think about space as a society?
No, there's a question, isn't it? Right now, space travel, it's this incredibly hard, crazy, expensive thing, right? Just a handful of people, highly trained astronauts, they get to do it.
Super exclusive club.
Exactly. But think about it. What if launching someone, into space, what if it's almost routine? Not saying it'll be like, hopping on a plane, not yet at least. But even the possibility, these lower costs, faster launches, who gets to go then? Who benefits? It's a different conversation.
It goes from this far-off dream to something real, something possible.
Right. Suddenly we're talking about sustainability, regulations, even like the ethics of space travel on this massive scale. Big questions for all of us.
Wow. From a rocket landing in midair
Okay.
to maybe changing how we see ourselves in the universe, that's quite the deep dive.
It really is. And the thing is, this is just the start. What SpaceX is doing, we'll all be watching. Who knows what's next, but it'll be exciting, that's for sure. And who knows what other questions it'll bring up.
So if you're out there listening and you're feeling that little spark, that what if, you're not alone. Keep those questions coming, keep looking up, and we'll be here to deep dive into whatever comes next, right here with you.